So today we're going to introduce the Roadmap to the Future initiative that's being led in Yolo County. We're going to discuss our collaborative effort and the funding strategies that we've adopted, as well as how we're measuring impact. And then we're going to share any insights that we've gained, and hopefully that informs what you might be able to do in your county. And we're about to queue up an introduction to the whole project in just a moment. But just so you know, what's on the screen there, there's handouts as well going around. Basically, the mission statement that we've lived by is the Roadmap to the Future is a long-term plan to help effectively coordinate the services, supports, and services that children, youth, and family in Yolo County need to thrive. And so our panelists today are going to share this important initiative from Yolo County and how it came to be. So first up, I'm going to introduce Karleen Jakowski. She's the Assistant Director of the Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency, or what we call HHSA. She also serves as the Mental Health Director and Public Guardian for Yolo County. And in her role, she supports the adult and aging and child, youth, and family branches of HHSA. So please join me in welcoming her. Next up, we have Garth Lewis. He is the Yolo County Superintendent of Schools. He was reelected to his second term as the county's 19th superintendent in 2022. And he is the first African-American to be elected as county superintendent in Yolo County. And he has served as an educator in Yolo County for 19 years and has a 27-year career in K-12 education. So join me in welcoming him. And I'm going to introduce him, but he is not in the room yet. He is hopefully closer than he was 30 minutes ago, but he's stuck in some traffic in Vacaville and Fairfield, so he might come in soon. So Lucas Frerichs represents District 2 on the Yolo County Board of Supervisors, which covers the cities of Davis, Winters, and UC Davis. He was elected to the board in June of 2002 and is currently the vice chair. All right, so to start the panel, we're going to ask Superintendent Garth Lewis to share the big picture of why the Roadmap to the Future work is and why this work is important.
All right, thanks, Anthony. And again, good morning to everyone. It was great to hear our colleagues from Placer County, a very much more mature collaborative. And if we think about them as a fully launched adult, we're in our toddler stage right now. So we're going to talk to you all about some of how we're standing up, falling down, standing up again as part of our journey in this work for sure. I do just have to take time to quickly acknowledge our team from Yolo County. So if you serve children, youth, and family from Yolo, and you're from Yolo County, you can just wave your hand at us back there. We were Yolo before Drake made it cool. And I also just have to acknowledge that I had a chance to commute with my oldest daughter here at Breaking Barriers. So Isabel, can you just wave your hand for us, baby girl? She's back there behind the pillar. It's interesting to be running in the same circles as your children. And so I will not tell any stories about my children today. But definitely glad to be able to share this space with all of you. The Roadmap to the Future in the big picture really is our local response to the confluence of three pretty complex and important issues. One, locally, how we recognizing in our response and recovery efforts around the pandemic that the pandemic and our response to it definitely impacted certain communities, right? Racialized communities, communities of folks who are living in poverty differently than other folks who are resourced differently, right? So that's one of the major issues for us that was a spawn of this work. The second piece is our local response to California's whole child equity work. This is, as we have been discussing over the last 2 days, and as you all have been working to make sense of it in your own worlds, the Roadmap to the Future makes sense to us as a response to a very ambitious policy agenda that is sometimes experienced, maybe not intentionally, but experienced at the local level in a very disjointed way. And so it's part of our response in terms of us being able to make sense of this work, this whole child policy work, and ensuring that we have that we're organized in our efforts in this way. And then thirdly, as we all have been blessed with and also challenged by, as an extreme amount of one-time dollars, right? This influx of one-time dollars into the system that causes us to have to think differently, for sure. And from my perspective, and in the work that we're doing here, it also requires us to think about how we're using these one-time dollars in transformative ways. And it causes us to really be challenged around how are we communicating with one another in this way, and ensuring that across systems, I'm going to drop the S at Richard's recommendation this morning, across the system that serves children, youth, and families, that we're able to do so, we're able to access and leverage these one-time dollars in a way that when we look back 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we'll recognize that that investment actually has a return on it, as opposed to squandering this opportunity. So those are the things that are on our minds as we're working on the roadmap to the future. There are a couple of strategies for us that have become increasingly important as we're doing this work. One is the development of what we're terming as foundational documents. Examples of those are our asset mapping exercises that we've done across the county, our needs assessment that we'll be launching very, very soon, as well as producing overviews of each of the components of our work. What that has allowed us to do is really develop coherence, attend to coherence making across the system over and over again. So utilizing these documents, ensuring that things are in writing, what are our intentions, ensuring that we have agreement with partners, that we're putting what our understanding of our agreements are in writing again, to allow us to sort of iterative and back and forth opportunity for coherence building, to ensure that as we do move forward, that in fact we are on the proverbial same page, if you will. The third, so we talked about the first strategy being that around the development of these foundational documents. The second strategy for us is getting the system in the room as much and as often as makes sense, right? As meaningful. And in this way, we have conducted a number of community engagement sessions. We've also conducted, and we'll hear more about this in just a moment, a number of collaborative efforts around ensuring that systems leaders, policymakers, children, youth, and families are in the same room at the same time, helping us to make sense of the work as a collective. And then the last strategy that we are finding to be very important in this work is attending to laughter in this work. And so we've been sort of trying to put together what we're calling loosely right now as our Laughter, Food, and Productivity Index. The reason for this, in our experience thus far, is that, one, the work is really, really hard, as we've all talked about. Collaboration is a hard response to hard problems. It's not an easy response or an easy solution, right, to hard problems. It's very, very challenging. In our efforts to ensure that we have coherence, last fall, within the County Office of Education, we began holding lunch meetings with our internal staff. And it was about, I'm going to say about 9 months into it, if I recall correctly, one of our staff members, in a very transparent moment, basically said that for the last few months, I've kind of been showing up for the sandwiches, right? But now I get it. Now I'm understanding, right? And so that is just to acknowledge the fact that, again, the work, the sandwiches are still there, right? The sandwiches are still great. But in fact, the work is difficult, as has been mentioned by some of the other panelists and presenters. As educators, this is not our training, right? We were trained, if we were secondary educators like myself, we were trained in our subject matter, right? And in standards. So this notion of cross-sector collaboration and understanding the power dynamics that come along with it and the importance of integrating our system is not a natural part of who we are in our training. And so it's been very important that we spend time, dedicate time to really understanding the work. And so we're going to dive deeper into some of those items in just a moment. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to my colleague, Lucas Frerichs, to give us, let's give him a minute to breathe. But just he is going to take us on a journey, to introduce you more fully to our county, and then also share our journey as it relates to the coalition building and our shared funding strategy. Perfect timing, my man.
Good morning, everyone. It is really, really good to see you all and be in this room. I was at the State Association of Counties board annual conference is happening in Oakland this week. I'm on the CSAC board of directors and attempted to come up here this morning from Oakland, and this is in all seriousness a really, really horrible accident halfway between Fairfield and Vacaville, and so but literally just arrived and I thought I would be here a lot sooner. So so good to be with you all, though. So let's see, just want to make sure the slides are up there.
There's power in being. Sometimes folks are on time, and sometimes you're in time.
Yes, exactly.
So you're in time.
Absolutely.
Thank
and
you.
It's good to see so many familiar faces. Many folks out there I don't know, but I see lots of familiar faces out there. Very good to see you all. So I'll just get a little bit of context in terms of, first of all, the Yolo County. You know, you can see there on the slide, population about 220,000 people. We're just across the river here from Yolo County and here in Sacramento. But 4 cities, home of UC Davis, of course, Yochadihi, Winton Nation, so tribal government, of course, as well, very strong partner of ours. 7 school districts, 5 primary school districts, and then parts of 2 other school districts. But then also you see some of the youth stats as well, real issues in our community regarding local poverty rates, especially in children of color. So there are a lot of issues that we all really try to work together on to improve upon all of that. If you can go to the next slide, please. So for me this morning, this is really about talking about the power of collaboration. I assume Garth already teed this up a little bit, but recall back during the pandemic, and this was in this case April 2021. There were 3 of us, Superintendent Lewis, myself, and Jesse Salinas, who is the Yolo County. He's the Yolo County ACE, the assessor, clerk recorder, and elections official for our county. And we began strategizing. We also added in at the time, I was vice mayor of the city of Davis at the time, now on the board of supervisors, but we added in another county supervisor, Supervisor Jim Provenza, but began just really meetings, some on Zoom, some in person, strategizing, drafting, editing a Google Doc about what we might want to see around this idea of a roadmap to the future for youth and children and families in Yolo County. And we realized that the 4 of us, might have something there, but it was going to take a lot more to get us where we needed to be. So we enjoyed it. We invited a bunch of our colleagues to join us. That's, I think, a real example of the Yolo way. We talk in Yolo County. We really talk about the Yolo way. It's really this, and I think it's real. It's about the power of collaboration, and that really is very, very true across many different difficult subject matters and projects that we take on in Yolo. We ended up with all the mayors, the vice mayors, the board of supervisors members, 4 school districts, 2 community college districts, and the Yolo County ACE. All of us ultimately in July 2021 signed 21 local leaders. No Brown Act violations out there. We kept it to less than a majority of each of our respective boards. But 21 local Yolo leaders issued a guest commentary with a call to action to invest in children and youth with American Rescue Plan funds. The op-ed was a real catalyst for additional collaboration from all cities and jurisdictions in the county. And there were, quite a few questions posed, right? How do we ensure our children and families move from surviving to thriving? How do we meet this post-pandemic moment and create structural change? Actually, you'll see the QR code on that slide as well, too. That will take you to the op-ed that we all wrote. It was featured in most of the media across Yolo County. If you want to take a look at that. And how do we tap the potential of the region and make it a place of innovation where young people thrive and families see our county as a place to work, live, and succeed? So subsequent to that, over the course of the summer and the fall of 2021, over 50 plus Yolo County leaders gathered for 3 virtual convenings to discuss ways to invest in communities and build our public infrastructure and support children, youth, and families in our county. Actually, one of those convenings included presentation by Breaking Barriers' very own Elizabeth Estes. So we had a fantastic amount of guest speakers that came and really participated in this process with us all as leaders, not just electeds, a lot of nonprofit leaders. There were a whole range of key staff as well, a lot of us participating in those efforts. So really appreciate that. Move along to the next slide, please. So, the COVID-19 pandemic was a challenging period. We all recall that, of course, and we experienced on so many levels. And if there were maybe any silver linings, albeit slight silver linings to the pandemic, one was, the Federal American Rescue Plan Act funding. I mean, that is just, of which Yolo County received $43 million. Again, I was on the City of Davis Council at the time. The City of Davis received $19 million. And other jurisdictions received their funds as well. So, the Board of Supervisors, along with a lot of our advocacy work, ultimately outlined principles for use of the American Rescue Plan funds. The priorities included one-time funding, nexus to the pandemic, needs-based and data-informed, maximizing opportunities, avoiding duplication, prioritizing transformational projects, and then linkage to our strategic plan. And one of the driving questions for the roadmap to the future that we had sort of brainstormed was, what if just by simply being born in Yolo County provided a child the advantage of better social determinants of health? And so investing in such a process clearly met the Yolo County ARP funding priorities. Much like the call to action from the elected officials in 2021, in total, the Roadmap to the Future project secured nearly $500,000 in funding from Yolo County and its 4 cities, 5 school districts, UC Berkeley, and as well as the Yolo County Office of Education to complete the first 2 phases of the Roadmap to the Future. Phase 1, of course, funded the collection of existing community asset and service data, as well as development of maps by each supervisorial district. That was awesome to have all that data and sort of see that on a map itself, including 2 community engagement sessions to secure community feedback in each supervisorial district. And then, where are we now? YCOE will soon provide a final report to the Board of Supervisors, going to make recommendations as to sort of for early no regrets actions informed by our shared priorities, initial information on community needs collected by YCOE through community engagement meetings throughout 2023. And this, I think, is the exciting part. Yolo County, at the time, set aside several $1 million of the ARP dollars to implement top priorities and assist children, youth, and families affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of us in this room, I think it's safe to say, have worked on reports that give aspirational, inspirational recommendations, and then we have to figure out how to fund them. And this was a real opportunity to know that we have funding, we get to dream and strategize on the best next step investments. And with that, I will turn it over to one of my co-presenters, Karleen.
Good morning, barrier breakers. Karleen Jakowski. It's really an honor to sit here in a room full of so many incredible leaders. I've been really inspired over the last 2 days here, and certainly to sit next to Superintendent Lewis and Supervisor Frerichs here in front of you today. I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper into the process that we undertook at the county level to allocate our American Rescue Plan funding and sort of how we've ended up funding a portion of the roadmap, which there'll be a little bit more information about. So as Supervisor Frerichs noted, the American Rescue Plan funding presented a historic and unprecedented opportunity for Yolo County to leverage $43 million to combat the local impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. I just want to say, you probably came to this conference thinking we're not going to hear the words COVID-19 or pandemic, but we're here to remind you of it today. It's never going to go away. So to this end, in March of 2021, the County Board of Supervisors developed principles to guide how these funds would be invested locally. Because there was no indication or expectation that these funds would recur in the future, it was important that they be treated as one-time funds rather than funds for ongoing commitments. We talk a lot about not standing up projects only to have them ultimately fail because there's no ongoing funding. So remembering the one-time nature of these funds was pretty critical to our process. To comply with the stringent funding restrictions associated with ARP dollars, a nexus to the pandemic needed to be clearly demonstrated. And there were three ways that we could demonstrate a nexus. One was to connect it to pre-existing gaps. And this meant that circumstances that existed prior to the pandemic, but that the impacts or negative outcomes were exacerbated by the pandemic. The second was direct impact, so that could include things necessary to respond to the present and immediate impacts associated with the pandemic, such as disaster response activities. And the last was recovery. This included items that would improve or accelerate the recovery from COVID-19 for the county or its residents, or to better prepare the county to respond to future disasters. The next priority was that projects would be considered for funding by the Board of Supervisors, that they needed to contain demonstrated need and available data was required to be provided to ensure that there was alignment between the funding and the need. In order to stretch and maximize the impact of this funding, the county prioritized partnering to the extent possible with cities, the state, or other agencies to create or support broader regional programming or impact. Because significant disaster funding was provided, as Supervisor Frerichs noted, at the state, federal, and other local jurisdiction levels, the county wanted to ensure that the projects funded were not duplicative unless the need outweighed what was available through existing or additional funding sources. Further, the county prioritized projects or programs that would be transformational in solving challenges or improving the county's ability to serve its residents. And as Supervisor Frerichs noted, the final priority was that this funding should be leveraged to the extent possible and appropriate to accelerate the goals that were included in the county's existing strategic plan. To ensure that the voices of our community were solicited early on in this process, the Board of Supervisors, in collaboration with the County Administrator's Office, held a series of community workshops, one in each of the 5 supervisorial districts in the county, with over 200 participants. There were clear priorities that stood out across all 6 workshops early on, and those included food security, housing and homelessness, behavioral health, children, and specifically childcare, and workforce development. From this preliminary work, there were 5 ARP work groups that were then developed. One for housing and homelessness, one for children, youth, and families, one for food security, one for mental health, and lastly, one that focused on community parks and facilities. The children, youth, and families work group was allocated $5.5 million, and that was in addition to nearly $4 million that were directly allocated to several high priority projects that were directly approved and funded by the board. And those included funding for the Boys and Girls Club, a home visiting pilot project developed by First 5 Yolo called Welcome Baby, and funding for the Yolo Crisis Nursery. At the time these work groups were developed, I was the branch director for our Child, Youth, and Family branch at the Health and Human Services Agency and the Child Welfare Director for Yolo County, and as such, I was luckily charged with leading the Child, Youth, and Family Work Group with a goal to bring together local leaders to make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors on how to invest these $5.5 million of the county's ARP funding to support the needs of children, youth, and families in our community. Next slide. So in collaboration with the CAO's office, we reached out to key leaders of child serving and safety net organizations in our community to invite their participation in this American Rescue Plan work. And I just have to note that there was a sense of urgency around convening this work group, around digging into information and getting those recommendations elevated to the board. There are time limits associated with both encumbering and spending the American Rescue Plan dollars. So it felt like we were working against the clock. We were begging people to meet within the next week, and I don't know what your calendars look like, but none of ours really supported that kind of a time schedule. And luckily, we had a group of folks who were passionate and willing to make the adjustments and to invest their time into this process. And so we quickly convened a group of innovative and passionate leaders in our community. This included representatives from the Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency, First 5 Yolo, the Yolo County Office of Education, the local Child Care Planning Council, the Maternal, Child, and Adolescent Health Advisory Committee, the Yolo County Child Abuse Prevention Council, the Yolo County Children's Alliance, which is a safety net organization serving children and families throughout our community, and the county administrator's office, who ensured that we followed the rules, remained aligned with the board priorities, and assisted us in navigating both the complexities and often political nature of the funding and local procurement requirements. So when we brought the group together, we quickly agreed that we needed to look at data, whatever data we could find to help drive our decision making, right? We wanted to align with that priority of the board, and we believed in that as well. And the data that we were able to dig into quickly gave us shocking information. For example, Yolo County has the highest poverty rate in the state of California. 20.9% of our residents live in poverty. There were existing deep disparities in social determinants of health in Yolo County. For example, by simply living in one census tract versus another within our own county, a Yolo County resident's life expectancy could vary by 19 years. These disparities were only exacerbated by the pandemic. Youth mental health was declining prior to the pandemic, and with schools 100% in distance learning and in constant states of lockdown, we saw a sharp decline in requests for mental health services for children and youth at the Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency. And by 2021, teachers were already seeing that the behavioral health needs of their students were skyrocketing with high rates of anxiety and depression affecting our kids. Childcare was already becoming increasingly unaffordable and inaccessible in Yolo County prior to the pandemic. And during the pandemic, Yolo County lost 1,000 childcare slots, 1,000. We also lost local resource family homes, further impacting our ability to keep Yolo County children and youth in foster care in their communities. The situation appeared dire. And I'll look to Garth because he was there with me. We felt overwhelmed by the information that we were facing. And we also knew that we had only seen the tip of the iceberg, right? We had maybe only scratched the surface with the data that we were looking at. We were desperately gathering any report or data source we could find, right, to try to put our minds together to figure out how to make these recommendations. With the data we were able to quickly compile and sort through, we quickly developed further priorities to inform how we would recommend these funds be invested in our community to help our community heal and recover. So we developed an additional set of priorities because the board's priorities were wonderful, but we needed our own too, right? So our own priorities included, our first was to sustain existing access. Simply put, we couldn't afford to lose any more than we had already lost. It was clear to the work group that one of our top priorities must be to retain our existing services and supports for children, youth, and families. Our second priority was to expand existing access to ensure more children and families would be able to access the supports they needed and services that work. The third priority was to recommend that our board consider funding projects or programs that had county-wide reach. Geographic equity was important to this group, as was ensuring that the needs of our neighbors in the rural areas of our county were met. And then lastly, our last priority was that programs and projects we recommended to fund, that they serve those who were most impacted by the pandemic. With these priorities and the data we had reviewed in mind, we further recommended a further allocation of that $5.5 million. This group lifted to the Board of Supervisors a recommendation that we allocate 40% or $2.2 million of that funding to childcare. Within this category, we were able to recommend that the board fund several key projects to promote childcare recovery and sustainability in the county. These included a childcare recovery project, matching funds for 2 childcare facilities, and a childcare connections program. We recommended that 10.9% or $600,000 of the funding be set aside for a project or projects that would promote equitable outcomes for children, youth, and families. Within this category, the work group recommended that the board allocate the majority of that funding to a project called the Yolo Basic Income Pilot, which I'll share a little bit more about in a minute. We recommended that 5.4% or $300,000 be allocated to child welfare. Very quickly in the work group process, as I noted, we were overwhelmed with trying to gather and review data and at the urgent need to know what our community needed from our community. We all agreed that there was so much we didn't and frankly couldn't know. There was consensus in the group that this process magnified the fact that we desperately needed a resource, a tool that could serve as an asset map and community needs assessment to ensure that we were truly lifting projects and programs that met the needs of children, youth, and families in our community. Funding the Roadmap to the Future needs assessment quickly became non-negotiable for the work group. And thus, the work group unanimously and wholeheartedly recommended that the board fund $200,000 toward the Roadmap to the Future project, and that the remaining 40% or $2.2 million of the ARP funds allocated to our work group be set aside to implement the priority needs identified through the needs assessment process. We knew that we didn't have the information we needed to ensure that we could invest those funds in a way that would truly reflect the voice of our community, and we believed that the roadmap would become the guiding tool our community needed for cross-collaboration and to intentionally seek and allocate funding in the future, far beyond the one-time funding made available through the American Rescue Plan. And I'm going to be wrapping my time up here quickly, I promise. I have heard a resounding theme over the last 2 days with you all that we need to ensure that the outcomes we measure are outcomes that are most meaningful to those utilizing services and supports, and I couldn't agree more. Yolo County has adopted the results-based accountability model to assess outcomes for programs and projects, and while not a perfect model, it provides a structure and a framework which seeks to answer at the simplest level 3 questions. 1, how much did we do? 2, how well did we do it? And 3, most importantly, is anyone better off? To demonstrate our approach to measuring impact, I'm going to briefly highlight the Yolo Basic Income Pilot Project, or what we affectionately refer to locally as YOBI. As you'll remember, the CYF ARP work group recommended to invest funding to help fill a funding gap for this project. We were one of many funders for this pilot project. It truly took a village to stand this project up, and was the dream and vision of our Health and Human Services Director, Nolan Sullivan, who was relentless in identifying funding and actually started the program without it being fully funded because he believed in it, right? And so in 2022, Yolo County began providing a guaranteed basic income, the Yolo Basic Income Program, to support some of the most vulnerable families in our community. This pilot project specifically supports families with children under the age of 6 experiencing the most significant poverty in our community, with 90% of those families being led by single women. These families were paired stipends with case management through our CalWorks program. To measure success, the Yolo County Health and Human Services Agency is partnering with UC Davis to conduct robust evaluations through a full study over the 2-year pilot period, specifically focusing on housing stability, income, family health, family mental health, and self-sufficiency. The preliminary findings issued by UC Davis in July of this year are compelling. Families have reported increases in feelings of life stability, housing security, a sense of community and trust in people in their neighborhoods, safety, and significant increases in participating in activities with their children, such as visiting a library, a park, or a playground, or watching educational shows with their children. Pictured on this slide here is Markeisha Brown and her son Eli. This is a success story that is near and dear to my heart for many reasons, and just one of those being that for a period of time, Markeisha and Eli were my neighbors. They were, sorry. They were recently featured in a Sacramento Bee article, which is linked here through the QR code, and I would strongly encourage you to read it when you have some time. Markeisha and her family suffered complex trauma and a horrifying loss. The cash payments through YOBI were instrumental in ensuring that she could provide a safe, stable home for Eli where they could both heal. In her own words, she says, when I did get YOBI, it was just a relief for me, and I knew that when I did get YOBI that my family was for sure going to be all right. I will now turn it over to Anthony Volkar, who will share the impact of the community engagement sessions held as part of the Roadmap to the Future.
I hope it's showing there's a lot of heart, right, in this project. So as Superintendent Lewis stated, it's clear from the onset of this project that the community needed to be involved. And so our original plan was to host 10 community sessions with 2 in each of our 5 cities and communities. So to anyone that has ever coordinated community engagement, and we've heard a lot of you acknowledge it today, that it's really challenging to get a strong turnout. And so some of these challenges to active participation were from our families who don't typically turn out. And I was responsible for the planning. And early on, and in my notes here, it says I was planning for about 100 people across 10 sessions. And our superintendent got into a meeting and promptly announced that he expected 1,000 people to turn out. We got closer to his vision than mine. And again, part of this is that we didn't know the type of audience that we would draw out. Close to the week before the sessions, we had about 20 people registered. But over the 10 sessions, we had about 725 registered, 627 community members attended. We had a challenge, so we mentioned our rural communities. We have some core cities. We had our rural communities. Folks told us the folks in the rural communities, they don't come out to community engagement. They're not engaged. But our winter session tied for being one of the largest sessions that we had of the 10. And in all, our attendance ranged from anywhere of 27 attendees to 103. And about 67% of people who registered attended, which is truly phenomenal. And so some of the steps we took to make sure that community engagement worked for our area was providing supports to reduce barriers. So we did dinner in every session. We did translation services in Spanish. We did Russian in a specific community that required it. We provided free childcare. In our first round, we provided a gas card incentive to really make sure that folks would turn out, knew it was important to us, as well as their time. We also had unique experiences. So we had a Spanish-speaking group from one of our districts, a group of Spanish-speaking families that a staff member brought out the whole group, as well our foster and kinship care program brought up a whole group of foster parents and families to our sessions. And the sessions were really about collecting community voice, and I'm proud to share that we really did deliver. We collected close to 1,400 points of data, 490 polls. We mentioned maps. There were 717 corrections or edits to these asset maps data, as well as 200 post-event surveys. But really importantly, we captured community voice. And this is their words, not ours. I didn't edit anything. So this is what community members were saying. We accomplished a common ground of what is lacking, what is needed, and where improvements can be made. Different members of the community came together to come up with common goals for our future. We are bridging between what we already have and what we would like to see. Hearing the community on what their concerns and needs are gave the community hope that these services will be available for our kids to succeed in the future. We identified gaps where support is not currently provided. The input from all sectors of the community is valued. We understand how many people really want the same outcomes. We are planning for a future. And lastly, we have started the process of making Yolo County a child-centered and nurturing place to be born and to grow up. Let's get to work. So on the slide here, I just want to share there are 4 priorities. And as I mentioned, you've seen some photos here of the community engagement work. As well, we started to expand. So we have work groups that have formed around 4 core priorities. You see them listed on the screen. As well, we're convening summits around each area, early learning, mental health, community schools and what we call the whole child approach, transition age youth. And so some of these, again, identified in the early stages that Lucas were talking about that have just kind of carried forward through the project. Now, one of the unfortunate things for our presentation is we weren't able to bring youth here. And I mentioned 10 community engagement sessions. There were actually 2 additional sessions hosted and held by youth. So on the screen here, you see this is an activity that they led. They asked the youth that were in attendance to ask where they stand on things like, I have everything I need in my city. I have access to free after school and out of school activities. And the youth were asked to move based on that. These are in the words of our chair and our secretary, who I will note is 14 years old. She's not in high school, she's in junior high, and the secretary is 15. She is a high school sophomore. They said youth from the cities came to the engagement sessions and talked about their struggle for change and how powerless they felt. Youth came from the cities and came and talked about their struggles. Many teens and younger kids from the ages of 6 to 10 joined us and ambushed us with a variety of community and societal problems that were otherwise unknown to the commission. Their words. We played several games to include the youth and make them comfortable enough to share the problems that they had. We were met with countless youth who complained about safety regarding schools and streets near their homes, and many complained about the lack of resources regarding the after-school sessions and in-school subject choices. But based on the data we collected, we found 3 areas of priority that need to be addressed. There aren't many recreational activities for kids to go to that are accessible and free of costs. We also want access to life and job skills, such as how to do taxes and apply to your first job. And civic engagement was another thing that was talked about, with more early exposure to civic engagement and how young kids can get involved in their community. That ends the youth voice. No, you please clap. It's phenomenal. I just want to acknowledge that was not my voice there, but I will acknowledge one of our county supervisors in hearing this said that it sounded great. It sounded like county staff prepared it. But again, acknowledging that they thought long and hard about how to incorporate the diverse youth voices into the conversation. And again, the Youth Commission was intended as a place for youth to be able to share their voice. Now with that, I'm going to note the time here. We have about 11 minutes. We wanted to allow time to kind of capture the lessons learned and talk about where we're moving forward with the project. So I'm going to bring it back to Superintendent Lewis.
Thanks, Anthony. Just to again remind us of the context, right? So we've talked about the American Rescue Plan funds. Just on the education side, we have the SB HIP work that we're doing in combination with our partners with HSSA. We have the MHSSA dollars. We also have CYBHI. We're working on UPK and universal and expansion of UTK. So there are a number of big initiatives, right, that we're all working on. What we came to the conclusion of locally, we have to have an integrated support system. We have to have a cross-sector collaborative support network in order for us to even absorb and make sense of these changes together, right? Ostensibly, by 2026, we're supposed to have a transformed system after the investment of these one-time dollars. Yet, one of the challenges we face is that there aren't dollars set aside right now for us to really do the integration work, right? And so that's a challenge for us. I'm thankful to have partners in this work who are utilizing our money. We stopped saying their money, right? It's our money in ways that we can't necessarily with some of the dollars that we have. We have some restrictions, some constraints we're dealing with, and so it is great that we have the ability to partner with our county and other agencies to support this effort. Just to paint the picture once more, related to the grand vision of this work, what we're ultimately seeking is that being born, cared for, or educated in Yolo County becomes an advantage for every child and youth as a result of the community's response to their developmental needs. That's our grand vision for this work, right? The needs assessment we see as a critical component to this effort. That's the next phase of the roadmap to the future. It will include a countywide needs assessment, a deep dive into both qualitative as well as quantitative data. We will be utilizing a framework that for child and youth development to help guide this work. As educators, again, we were trained in standards in our content area, and in the K-12 system, unlike our early care partners, child and youth development is not a specialty for us in the TK-12 system, right? And so we're introducing a child and youth development framework as an overarching organizing principle for all systems across the county. We are establishing an advisory committee that will be made up of community leaders, including one of our parents, academics from UC Davis, and some of our community-based organization leaders. They will help us to ensure that we are true to what our community has already said to us are their priorities as we approach our needs assessment. So that's an accountability piece for us as the lead agency. This will result in the final report to the Board of Supervisors and to the city councils, to the school districts that will provide in 2024. It will inform the remaining investment of $2.2 million in ARP dollars from the supervisors, as well as outline priorities and recommendations for investment for cities, school districts, as well as recommendations regarding who in the county is best poised to advance or actualize this work, and whether we in fact have the core competencies to do so, or are there some outside support we may need. We are continuing to explore partnerships within Yolo County And one of the strategies that we're utilizing to assist with this work is the development of work groups and summits to continue to build momentum and the coalition around this work. You have in your handouts one of the documents I want to just draw your attention to is, I don't have it with me. Can you hold that one up? Yeah. I just want to share that internally, I talked to you about the fact that we're going to share with you how we're sort of standing things up and kind of skinning our knees as well. What you're seeing in front of you is our current best thinking as the County Office of Education and our leadership role in this work, how we're organizing ourselves. So when I began to understand that this was taking root within our organization was when one of our directors brought an early version of this document to me, unprompted. I didn't ask for it. This was something that was percolating in her mind, right? And it's then been refined over time through conversations with our team. And so again, we're saying we're very, very early in this work. We're still in the coherence and sort of sense-making effort, if you will. We believe we're on the right track. There have been many, many affirmations from previous presenters at the conference that are putting wind in our sails for sure. And we're looking forward to the day where being born, cared for, and educated in Yolo County becomes an advantage. Those accidents of birth, according to the research literature, right? That a child was accidentally born, cared for, educated in Yolo County becomes an advantage for that young person. So with that, that's the end. Thank you.
So this is a good space to remind you that we're doing our best to document the work that we're doing. So you have your handout that kind of summarizes the phases as well. We have a website, ycoe.org, and a Facebook page as well. Our panelists have invited you if you have any questions about the work. And again, could there folks from Yolo County, anyone who participated in all-in session, works at YCOE or Yolo County, raise your hand again so folks can identify. And again, I see, but these aren't folks that just work for YCOE or Yolo County. There are agencies, our nonprofit partners, community leaders, and so this is a really big coalition that's coming together to achieve this work. So please reach out to us if you have any questions. And again, thank you for your time today.